Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Israel Hawkins. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about the people of Venezuela that are suffering as the politicians go back and forth with their tit for tat, between Guaido and Maduro, and of course the United States putting pressure economically on Venezuela. Israel is postponing the proposed annexation of the West Bank. And also we're going to talk a little bit about locusts, and we mentioned some of that before in the past with the swarms that were taking place in parts of Africa and the Middle East. And we're also going to give you an update on the coronavirus and what the Texas governor is doing to stem the growth in his state. Well, U.S. prosecutors have moved to seize the gasoline on board of 4 Iranian tankers headed to Venezuela that set sail last month. The civil forfeiture complaint's goal is to stop Iran from receiving revenues from the sale of the gas and deter future shipments. Daniel McAdams, the executive director of the Ron Paul Institute, spoke to RT regarding the U.S.'s moves to deter Iran and Venezuela from moving forward economically. He said the U.S. is trying to use their weight to terrify the ship's owners and control shipping between the two countries.
Well, he continued, we saw a shipment that did go through last month. So the big question is, how far is the Trump administration willing to go to stop these ships? Now, Mr. McAdams also mentioned how Trump is considering speaking with Maduro in an attempt to make peace and would talk to Iran as well. But the people surrounding Trump are war hawks, and they're making traps that he's not allowed to get out of.
Well, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights said concerning Venezuela, people in Venezuela continue to suffer grave violations of their human rights and their economic and social rights due to low salaries, high food prices, persisting deficiencies in public services such as electricity, water, and fuel shortages, and precarious access to health care. The crisis has been exacerbated by the increase in sanctions in different sectors and the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, when asked why the UN isn't stepping in to help Venezuela, Mr. McAdams said, the UN is just a toothless front for U.S. foreign policy.
Well, he continued that the UN never does anything that the U.S. opposes. The U.S. pays most of its bills. It puts its people in its positions, and therefore the UN never crosses the U.S. Now, the sanctions against Iran and Venezuela are a form of state-sponsored terrorism, and he said in closing that he was ashamed as an American that this is the particular form of foreign policy that is pursued in Washington.
Well, continuing with Venezuela, the Bank of England has in its vaults 31 tons of Venezuelan gold. Maduro's government requested some of their country's own gold to help pay for what they said was vitally needed relief. Well, opposition leader Juan Guaido's representatives said that the money would only go to repress the Venezuelan people. After winning a contested election 2 years ago, Maduro had been accused of vote buying and election fraud by opposition parties.
In addition to the political strife and economic crisis, sanctions and plummeting oil prices have pushed the oil-rich nation to the brink of collapse. And on top of all that, the coronavirus has hit the country's ailing health system, which has been neglected for years. And even though the UK recognizes Juan Guaido, the constitutional interim president, it is still maintaining full diplomatic relations with the Maduro government, with UK representation at the British Embassy in Caracas, and Maduro's appointed ambassador is still in the Venezuelan embassy in the UK.
Interesting. Well, UK courts ruled that the gold couldn't be released as the UK government, along with 50 others, don't recognize Maduro as the legitimate ruler of Venezuela. While Guaido has won his first step, Maduro's government lawyers said they will appeal the decision. Guaido's lawyers said that they will be directing the Bank of England to keep hold of the assets, increasing pressure on Maduro and further oppressing the lives of the people of Venezuela.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we're now going to turn to our field correspondent, Larry McGee, who has an interesting story on Israel and Jordan. We know that these two countries share the, Israel's border, the largest portion of their border borders Jordan. And the river, the Jordan River that runs right through there is now kind of coming into a question as, is it okay, and what's taking place with the river as these annexations go forth in Israel. So Larry McGee has the details on the annexation and what's occurring with the Jordan River. Larry?
As nations still struggle to handle the plague that swept through all lands, the blight of warfare and hostilities is not at all decreased, and especially not in the Euphrates. There have been warnings for years of looming wars over water, and that is most likely to increase as the life-sustaining commodity becomes increasingly more scarce due to defilement and pollution. The top experts, in fact, are identifying the Earth's waters as the area from which the next global crisis will emerge. And it is already an issue of major concern for many Middle East nations, including Israel and Jordan, whose cooperative efforts to clean up and utilize the sewage-filled waters of the Jordan River are presently being threatened by Israeli plans for annexation in ancient Canaan, which is now, of course, known as modern-day Palestine. Eco-activists working on both sides of the river to heal its dying waters recount difficulties and hostilities due to Israeli, Jordanian, and Syrian politics, and regretfully acknowledge that continual war threatens to undermine all of their much-needed projects. From the outset of the current administration, there has been a deliberate effort to project solidarity between the United States and Israel, with everything from matching scarlet ties to photo opportunities of extended warm welcomes and supportive body language. Israel has christened President Trump as the best friend it has ever had in the White House and has even dedicated a memorial square to him in Israel. The square has become a popular hotspot for protests for those who oppose Israel's present plans for annexation in the region, however, the energy of which has become so dense with animosity that the waters of the memorial's pond were recently made red with paint, accompanied by red lettering on the sidewalk which announced the annexation will cost lives. For many informed people, though, those red waters are a definite prophetic sign. But as for the planned annexation which triggered the act, the opposition with regard to it is more than just local. Internationally, various world leaders have spoken out in condemnation of the Israeli plan, including Germany's foreign minister, who stated that his country still sticks to negotiating the two-state solution. Due to the backlash, Israel has reportedly chosen to postpone its intention until a more opportune time. But analysts say time is definitely of the essence, since prominent American presidential candidates are joining on the side of the opposition. India's effort to oppose the swarms of mighty locusts covering its land is not producing much fruit. Have a look at this video of the crucial insects marching through New Delhi in hordes, with nothing that anyone can truly do to stop them. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Well, it's interesting, with the Jordan River, how so much water is being diverted. And so there's a little bit of a crisis in that regards. But at the same time, you've got a huge increase of the locusts taking place in other places. And we know that they do a tremendous job in trying to clean up a lot of filth throughout the land. And so it's interesting that their numbers are up, unlike any time before. Well, as we reported last week, coronavirus cases seem to be increasing at a higher rate, especially across the southern United States. U.S. deaths have increased by over 5,000 people in just 1 week, which brings the death toll up to 125,900. Well, globally, over 500,000 people have died, so that means the United States accounts for about 1/4 of those deaths.
And according to the World Health Organization, the pandemic does not look to be over anytime soon. Now, more than half of the states in the U.S. have seen an increase in cases and hospitalizations, which is leading to long lines at testing sites. Now, gatherings for big holiday weekends like 4th of July concern experts who warn that the country could pay a high price for partying without any further precautions since the last holiday weekend back in May, and that was Memorial Weekend, when they also saw an increase because of all the gatherings.
That's right. Well, currently about half of all new cases reported in the U.S. are from California, Texas, Florida, and Arizona, which has forced governors to put out new mandates and close businesses for a second time. For example, Arizona's governor has decided to shut down bars, nightclubs, and water parks for the next month. In Florida, bars and beaches are also being forced to close. And while New York and New Jersey were just beginning to reopen, they are now reconsidering that for establishments like restaurants, shutting those down again too.
Well, Abilene, Texas, and all of Taylor County has also seen a jump in the number of coronavirus cases recently. In one day, Abilene alone recorded 70 new cases and even one new death from the virus, taking it up to 6. Now, local leaders got together to discuss how they will implement the Texas governor's new orders. The governor has put a limit on the number of outdoor gatherings, as well as number of people there in those outdoor gatherings, as well as made it mandatory for every Texan to wear a mask when they're out in public.
Well, big country officials like City Manager Robert Hanna agree with Governor Abbott's new mandate, which he believes will help stop the spread of the virus. Mr. Hanna told CBS affiliate KTAB News that hospitalizations in Abilene had risen to 540% over the past week. Well, Hanna said that's not anything to just dismiss. That's something that's serious, and people need to do what they can to limit the spread.
Well, KTAB News also spoke with Taylor County Judge Downing Bowles and Mayor Anthony Williams. Now, Judge Bowles explained Taylor County officials don't have any problems with the new mandate, saying Governor Abbott, in putting his orders into place, supersede our orders. So, in effect, he takes that out of our hands, and whatever he says to do is what we're going to do because he mandates that what we do.
Well, Mayor Anthony Williams also backed up that statement, adding Abilene and this country are going to submit ourselves to the laws of this country and this state. We won't have anarchy in Abilene, Texas. Now, the city of Abilene also sent out a code red alert, which Mr. Hanna explained was, quote, to educate people and give them information and allow them to make an informed decision. It's not intended to scare anybody. It's not intended to agitate. It's not intended to stir the pot. It's an attempt to give good people good, solid information.
Well, heading towards the 4th of July weekend, some think the governor's new orders will disrupt celebrations, but Mr. Hanna warned the coronavirus is a real problem as 18 people fight for their lives in the hospital. Now, Judge Downing Bowles agrees, sharing, this is nothing to be played around with, he said, and people who think they are somehow immune from this, that's just not the case.
That's right. Well, KTAB's evening anchor Bob Bartlett had the opportunity to interview Governor Greg Abbott just shortly after the governor announced he was ordering all Texans to wear face masks. He asked the governor to explain how he came to his decision and what it all entails.
Well, the governor was holding this back as a last resort after reopening Texas. He told Mr. Bartlett, "I said when we opened up the state of Texas for business that if the positivity rate, which is the percentage of people who are tested positive, goes above 10%, that would set off alarm bells."
Well, he continued to explain how some counties, like Tom Green, have experienced a double in cases in just the past 10 days, and that speed of increase is taking place across Texas. Having that knowledge, the governor said he wanted to avoid shutting down the economy again, and so he was looking to the experts for alternatives that could slow the spread of the disease.
Governor Abbott told Mr. Bartlett, "Doctors say the best thing that we can do is for people to wear face masks. If you wear a face mask and everybody else is wearing face masks, it pretty much eliminates the transmission of COVID-19. It's been done in other states, it's been done in other countries, it can be done in Texas. In fact, it was done in Texas more effectively back in the April timeframe than it is today."
Well, he continued, "Our goal is to make sure that people will be able to continue to prosper while also protecting their lives. We can achieve both by having people wear face masks." Well, Mr. Bartlett went on to ask how the weekend holiday celebrations coming up and church gatherings in Abilene would be affected by the governor's orders.
Well, the governor clarified that the limit of 10 was for outdoor gatherings, so this would not apply to churches who usually gather indoors. Then he went on to explain, quote, "I specifically said that churches were not subject to this order. Separate from that, with regards to gatherings of 10 or more outdoors, I say that mayors or county judges have the authority to allow those events to go forward."
Well, Governor Abbott explained that their celebrations could go on as long as local officials were taking responsibility and precautions to ensure no further spread of the coronavirus could take place at those events. The governor also cleared up the question on the numbers and if things were being made to look as though they were growing when they aren't. He said, "In the first few days of antibody tests, the numbers were combined, but they were quickly separated and provided separately. But other than that, all the numbers have remained exactly the same, except for one thing. Since June, they have been going up."
Well, the governor continued, "So whether it be the number of people testing positive, the hospitalizations, the positivity rate, and now deaths are going up. Those are warning signs that we have a problem on our hands that requires more response to make sure we contain. Because if we do not contain this measure right now, we will lose the last best chance to slow the coronavirus for anything short of having to shut our economy back down. And that's the last thing we want to have happen in Texas." And I'm sure, Catan, that many people actually share the Texas Governor Abbott's concerns that they don't want to shut the economy down, not just the Texas economy, but also their state's economy and really the economy of the nation. So, but Governor Abbott now mandating the wearing of masks, that's really just one item that can be done. There's also the wearing of gloves, protecting your hands, disinfecting yourself, your packages that you purchase from the store, disinfecting yourself before you enter your homes. All of these can be done to actually keep yourself and your family safe in the face of this coronavirus. Now, Yisrael Hawkins of the House of Yahweh has been teaching these practices to his members for decades, long before the coronavirus turned into a pandemic that the whole world is now fighting. Well, where did he get this life-saving information, vital information? None other than the Holy Scriptures. But that's only a fraction of the information that Yisrael Hawkins has revealed and actually foretold about that comes from your own Bible. If you'd like to see for yourself what you've been missing, contact the House of Yahweh today, and when you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the monthly newsletter and Prophetic Word magazine. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites by going to Yahweh.com, YisraelHawkins.com, and Yahweh'sBranch.com. Or visit our website by going to YPNnews.com. You can email the House of Yahweh at info@yahweh.com. And for all calls outside the United States, please dial the number on your screen. And don't forget the Israel Says and Ask Israel program, which are the best online free tools to aid you in studying and understanding the Holy Scriptures and prophecies. You can find those programs by going to YisraelSays.com and AskYisrael.com.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next is a message from Yisrael Hawkins bringing you that life-saving, vital information. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.